Hey, how are you guys doing today? We're having a blast.
We are.
We
Already.
are.
Already today. Can you believe that?
What do you mean already?
Oh.
We're still having a good time. It's what we
No,
do.
it's not always a good time, Randall.
What are you saying?
I'm just saying, you know.
Hmm.
Okay.
Okay, so today we got a lot
Yeah.
of really cool things happening.
We do.
Isolate today. CBD isolate, CBD powder,
Let me
CBD
see it.
isolate powder, CBD crystals,
Oh,
isolate
yeah.
wholesale, etc. I mean, there's all kind of isolate
Bulk CBD
words
isolate. Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
You do a lot with isolate.
You do. People who need THC-free formulations typically want to have isolate. And a lot of people ask, well, how do you make that? Of course, we've put a lot of people into the business of making isolate.
We do.
And it's a set of lab equipment and processes and things like that. But we get them up on training, and they're producing lots of great isolate.
Yeah, we do that for, we do talk a lot about CO2 and ethanol extraction processes and the comparisons and what they are. But the post-processing of solvent removal and winterization and things, there are sometimes you need that, sometimes you don't. But when you get into the distillate and then the isolate, so the big saleable products are full spectrum distillate and then isolate. So CBD isolate is really, really valuable
Sure.
and used as bulk ingredients in a lot because it doesn't have flavor and it's highly potent.
Yes, and it doesn't have flavor, doesn't have any smell to it either.
Yeah.
And
taste, because somebody made me taste it.
Yeah, we made you taste it, but we mixed it with 200 proof.
No, I think it was in a beaker with a spoon, and you had me taste it so that they could see that I tasted it.
All right.
It was not sugar; it was isolate.
It was tasty.
And there was no taste.
Okay, that's good.
No, perfect. All right. So apparently, I was told that we have 85 slides today.
No, I think there's gonna be a little bit less, but close, but close. So in a couple hours we'll be done, guys. Don't worry.
No, we're always respectful of your time. It's going to be fun, and today is going to. I'm looking forward to today because isolate is something I get asked about all the time.
Yeah.
We take people there, and there's a lot that you can do from it, to it, through it, everything.
All right. So let's get going.
Go.
Awesome. Okay. We got a cool little video here. We got to show you that first. Oh my word, it's advancing. How do I turn this on? There we are. Look at that. Wow.
Where did you get that?
I got that from you, Randall. Okay, that's pretty awesome. That's just basically one of the processes that we use to make sure that the materials are dry.
Yep.
You can spin dry, if you will.
It is spin dry.
It's a spin dry. So you're just using a Rotovap or something there to do that. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go over and we're really going to define what CBD isolate is.
Cool.
So what is CBD isolate? How to make CBD isolate? How to make CBD oil from isolate powder? That's interesting. What equipment do I need to make CBD isolate, and how to scale up CBD isolate production? So those are some of the questions that we're going to really talk about in this presentation. I'm not going to come back to this outline like sometimes I do. It's just going to be we're just going to rock it right on through. So
I love that.
Let's make it happen.
We're all smart enough to know where we're headed.
We're all smart enough to know where we're headed. Now look at this here. So we got, everybody has seen this chart. We got pre-processing, extraction, and post-processing. So when you guys are taking hemp and you're bringing it into a crude oil, you're bringing it into a distillate, or you're bringing it into an isolate, this is the typical process that you would use. And typically this isolate process really is considered a post-processing technique, even though it's still processing.
Correct.
Okay. And it's one of the two methods that you would use to get isolate or get a very highly purified form of a cannabinoid, such as CBD. The other form would be chromatography. And chromatography is also a technique that allows you to separate out THC from CBD, but it does it in a different way. It does it through chromatography versus precipitation.
And we've done other shows on chromatography,
right?
And those are things. Take a look at those on our YouTube channel.
Right. Yeah. Please do. So you guys have seen this before. If you've taken any of our other courses, or if you've looked at some of our old podcasts, we have basically from the beginning to end, we walk through the whole entire process. We do that via lecture, and then we also do that in the plant. So if you want to take a live tour, you can sign up for the live
Yeah,
tour
let's go.
at any time and just make it happen. So here's my cursor here. So we're going from plant processing all the way through decarboxylation, which is optional. Then you're going into extraction and and then you're going up to dewaxing. And then you can see it's cut off a little bit, but essentially you're going, here is oil or ethanol removal or solvent removal. Here is distillation, white film distillation. And then here is where you would probably put in an isolate laboratory or a chromatography laboratory.
Hmm.
So the chromatography will get you broad spectrum CBD, which has a lot of the matrix, a lot of the flavors still in it, as opposed to isolate, which won't get you that.
Yeah, yeah. And again, when you have full spectrum, that's the full entourage of everything. That's all the cannabinoids, all of the terpenes, all the THC that is at legal limits.
Yes, that's
Right.
right.
So that's the full spectrum. When you go broad spectrum, you're really just remediating out the THC.
Correct.
But all of the full spectrum cannabinoid and the terpenes are in that broad spectrum. The only thing remediated out is the THC,
Right.
for at least the process that we use. And then when you go to isolate, you're just optimizing for a single cannabinoid. In most of instances, that's CBD. We've done it for CBG, CBN, and other cannabinoids, but we're optimized for CBD, and that's most of the market.
Yeah, right. So that's a really good option. I mean, you got your broad spectrum, you got your CBD distillate, you have your CBD isolate. So
Mhm.
people use these different forms of CBD for different formulations, right? So
Yeah.
that's why you'd use them. Okay. So here's a picture of what that might look like. Here's some crude right here. Here's some distillate. This may be some broad spectrum stuff. You can see it's kind of light in color, so broad spectrum, and then it's also starting to crystallize out. So the CBD would typically start to crystallize out, and that's why you see that isolate here, like that. What is the best CBD oil to make CBD isolate? So obviously you have to start from somewhere. A
Sure.
lot of people ask, okay, well, can I make can I go from CBD crude right to isolate, right?
Sure.
And typically you would want to winterize it, which means you would want to remove the fats and waxes.
Sure.
Or if you could do that in your CO2 machine, or if you do that in your ethanol machine or whatever, a lot of people like to do that winterization step in their machines, which is no problem. And then you go to a distillate. And the distillate is you're basically removing a lot of the matrix
Sure.
and you're also increasing the potency, so that's what distillate is. So typically when we make isolate, we use distillate,
Yes.
just because the recovery is a lot better than if you're using like winterized or crude. So that's the main reason we use distillate. It doesn't mean that you couldn't use winterized oil to make isolate. The problem that we see there is that you're going to have a really hard time getting to that 99%
Exactly.
pure. So one thing to note here also is that sometimes there is if there's a lot of seeds, for example, in your hemp material,
Mhm.
and you start to extract that, you're starting to extract seed oil. A lot of times that seed oil co-precipitates out into your isolate. It's hard to get to
Oh,
the 99%.
wow.
And so a lot of people wondering, well, I tried this. I really tried your process. I tried this and I can't figure it out. I don't know why. I can't get to the 99% pure. It looks like I'm getting like 95. I'm getting 96, 97. It's because of all the seeds in your
And
in your
your biomass.
in your biomass. Yeah. That is a reason. It's not the only reason, but
Sure.
that is a possible reason. So
Interesting.
so when you when you think about purity of your isolate, you got to think about your input materials and the fact that some things can co-precipitate out. I don't know what co-precipitates out or even what the stuff was that co-precipitated out when I observed that myself in
Interesting.
the past, but it happens.
Have you
So
seen 90% distillate? 90%. I have not seen 90%. That's
you can
high.
oh yeah, you can make 90% distillate.
Really?
Yeah, you just keep going. You
Just
just
keep
do it
going.
again. Yeah.
You can't pass 24.
Can Yeah, Cannabis 1, Cannabis 2, Cannabis you just keep going, so,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay. I wasn't aware.
But the yield's no good, right?
Yeah,
So,
because it
yeah.
just keeps coming down and
Right,
down
so
and
that's
down.
why people don't do it. Typically a second pass will get you at 70%.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
So what is CBD isolate? Okay. This is kind of a pictorial view of what CBD isolate is and how it's made and, kind of like a percentage view. It's just a different view. Here you have your CBD distillate. You can see that that's made up of this CBD. It's got a significant amount of THC in it typically because that's something where you're distilling. It's usually co-distilling with it,
Yep.
and that's why you need to get that THC out of there. So either you go through this precipitation route and go to your CBD isolate, or you can go to chromatography and take that THC out of there.
And the other part for packagers and things, they'll take that distillate and then just dilute it down.
Yeah, they'll dilute it down, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
So
that brings you down
if you're
below
making
those.
tinctures, then
Yes.
it will dilute that down. If you're making, nobody wants to really use for vapor pens, PGVG, then you can dilute it down into those diluents, I guess. Yeah, and then there's also this. There still is a significant amount of wax fat. There's sterols in there. There's flavonoids in there. There is some terpenes, by the way, guys. They're
Mm.
they're just they're higher boiler terpenes. They come over with the CBD. They're not desirable from the standpoint of aroma, but they're they're more of they're
They're long chain, a little
long
harsher.
chain
Yeah.
terpenes.
Yeah.
So like the cholesterols and things like that. They're very large. Okay, they come over and they co-distill. Okay,
Gotcha.
so yeah, so that's really what CBD isolate is. Here is a chemist molecule model of CBD. It's always interesting to note that one of the reasons why you can do a good separation here is because of these alcohol groups. Okay, so when you do this precipitation event right here,
Mhm.
it's because of these alcohol groups in the solvent that you're using. That's why it's no longer soluble when you reduce the temperature. So yeah, it tends to precipitate out. So we'll go into that in
So
a
the
little
cool
bit.
thing about going all the way to distillate and isolate
Yeah,
is it's all chemistry.
yeah, yeah. It's just processing. Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
but see,
It's processing
he's
and
like, oh,
it's
ho hum.
chemistry.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's all chemistry. Look, we're making the
he can
molecules.
pile it
Looks
higher and deeper,
beautiful.
Mr.
The
PhD in analytical chemistry. So he's like, yeah,
yeah.
whatever,
All right.
whatever.
Here we go. So here's how we make CBD
Oh,
isolate in a seven-step,
let's go.
7 steps, 7 easy steps. Okay, so you dissolve your CBD distillate in non-polar organic solvent. A lot of people are like, what is that solvent, right? Well, you can use different kinds of solvent and they will work. The key thing is that it should be non-polar.
Non-polar.
Um, yeah, so that's the first thing, and we'll get into that.
Okay.
What the ideal solvents are, and then you want to heat it gently. Basically, what you're trying to do is you're trying to add enough heat into it so that your isolate is now dissolving in the organic
But
solvent,
gently.
but gently, yeah. And then you want to cool it slowly to -40. A lot of people will go down to -20 and it still works, but you typically would want to, go down really cold. But you do it slowly.
Just like
And
at a degree
while
at a time or a
yeah,
couple
while
degrees.
stirring. And that's the key thing because you don't want to have very large chunks. So the key thing is to get the crystals really small. And
Gotcha.
the only way you can do that is if you stir and mix while you're cooling. Okay.
Stir, stir, stir.
Once you have all the filters, once you have all the crystals in there, they're just kind of suspended, and sometimes they precipitate out, and you'll see a bunch of solvent on top and a bunch of crystals there, and you'll want to know, okay, now I need to remove the crystals from the actual solvent. So you need to filter those. You wash the crystals out because oftentimes the crystals will retain some of the stuff that is in the solvent.
Hmm.
Okay, and then you recover the solvent. This is basically a separation of all the other junk that you're removing, all those waxes. The THC is in there. Um, the other plant matrices that are in there that are left over from the distillate, those are now being removed from the solvent. And typically, you would manifest that as waste because it would have a high degree of THC. And
Sure.
so typically you would have a process by which you would manifest your waste and, you would destroy that material. And then you dry the crystals. And that's kind of what we showed you just at the very beginning where they're drying the crystals. They're fluffing them. They're
Yeah.
fluffing them
That's what that was doing in the
yeah, in the rotovap, yeah.
roundabout.
And you reduce the particle size. So typically you would first get an initial dry, you would reduce the particle size, and then you would dry again, and then you would test. And the testing really is to make sure that you don't have any more of that nonpolar organic solvent in there.
Because you're removing all of that. You need to get that
You're
out.
trying to remove all of it.
Yep.
And of course, my view on that is you're not going to be able to remove it all.
Yep.
Okay. And interestingly enough, when you do your test for potency, you got 99% pure, right? But you could still have quite a bit of like whatever your organic solvent is in there because your detector typically can't see it.
Yeah. Oh,
So that's
okay.
something to keep note. So I think it's really important for you to make sure that you have the right tests. In fact, we've trained lots of people on what test to use. That you need to have
Sure.
a GC headspace. You need to have a HPLC, and we've trained people on how to use those and then use them in their facility.
That's very cool. On number 3,
Yeah.
I'm one of those rare people who still I'm absolutely amazed that we fly giant hunks of metal in the air. And I am just excited about, the wing and the air, how we do that. I'm very excited about the fact that we can do tons of metal that float on water. I think that's very cool. I think that number 3, cooling slowly to minus 40 degrees C, is akin to that kind of magic.
It is.
Because it's the same thing, and this is the way I portray it in layman's terms, and that is that what happens from 2 to 3 when you're cooling it slowly is all of a sudden it just magically turns into like snow. It's
Little-
like from water.
Little white powder.
It is.
Little
It's
white powder
crazy.
floating in the water.
You got the stuff and it's going, and then all of a sudden it goes poof. It's like now it's white. It's very cool.
Yeah, it is.
If you haven't seen it, you got to see it.
Yeah, so that's essentially how you make CBD isolate in 7 easy steps.
7 easy steps.
Yeah, nothing. Just go ahead.
I could do that.
You probably could. Probably could. Ooh, look at that! I have a little snow picture. You see that?
That's very cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. Okay. So what is the best solvent for making a CBD isolate? This is, and I just have some pointers for you.
Non-polar.
It should be non-polar.
Yeah.
It's got to be non-polar.
So it can't be like a big white bear.
No, yeah, it can't be a big white bear. It cannot be it can't be ethanol, for example,
Oh.
right? It can't be ethanol in water, or it can't be another polar solvent, methanol. It can't be methanol. It can't use IPA or isopropyl alcohol. You can't use an alcohol to do this. You have to use a nonpolar solvent. So what are nonpolar solvents? Let's review them. We have, you can go with butane. You got propane, which is 3 carbons, butane, 4 carbons, pentane, that's 5 carbons, 6 is hexane, 7 is heptane. And then there's nonane and decane, but I don't think that you want to use those because I think they come into powders at that point in time. The deal there is that you got to choose one of those nonpolar solvents, okay? And you want to try to avoid hexane, of course, because of the toxicity of hexane. You could use heptane, of course, but heptane has a higher boiling point than pentane. If you use butane or pentane, you could. The issue with that is you have to purge it, and there's residuals in there, and you have to purge it. So you have to live with residuals. So or by purging or whatever. So those are some of the reasons why you need a GC headspace. Now, one of the reasons I don't like a GC headspace for testing is because the detection limit is pretty high, and so but the requirements from the FDA says that you can have you can eat 5,000 parts per million at a time, and it's no problem. It'll pass the test. So
Wow.
if you agree with the FDA, you can continue with that. Otherwise just go ahead and make sure that you're as low as you can get. Yeah. I don't think there's any real way around this non-polar solvent. Now, there are other gases, for example, CO2 could be used for this, and some people have used it for precipitations quite a bit. So, and that's a very well-known, technique. So, it just hasn't really been, too much implemented in this field. Although some people, there's no reason why you couldn't do it.
So
in
based on
CO2.
what you said, if you're looking at, if you can use butane or pentane, but you got to make sure that you're getting the residuals. They're not ideal. You don't want to really use the hexane because of the toxicity.
Yeah, that's
so
correct.
An ideal at this point is heptane.
No, I would use pentane.
Pentane and
Yeah.
still just work for the residuals.
Yeah, and then just work, and then basically
Get the residuals.
because it's easier to remove pentane, it's easier to remove it from the
Yeah.
from the mix.
That's
So
what I hear the most. I have heard of people having disastrous results with methane, and they shouldn't use it, as you just said. But I have people that said, "Hey, I tried this. It's not working. What am
yeah,
I doing
you
wrong?"
mean with butane would work too.
Yeah.
You could do that.
Okay.
So those are things, usually when you buy the gas, you buy butane or you buy propane, usually you got to watch out what you're buying. So you can buy, very pure butane and in a non-mix. So
Mm.
that's what I would recommend. So that is it. Now, that's the skinny on CBD isolate. It's better if you have something that's easier to recover. That's why the lower boiling point or pentane would be better than say heptane.
Yeah.
Non-toxic or less toxicity or unknown toxicity in the case of say pentane, and then non-flammable. That's where you can't get everything you want. You can't always get what you want. You're gonna basically
Where's
you
our
know
button for the Rolling Stones tune?
it's not
You can't. You can't
okay.
always get what
Yeah,
you
you can't
want,
get what you want. So
but
not
sometimes you
everything.
get what you need.
That's probably it. There are ways through this, but just you have to deal with the residuals and make sure that you know what you're doing there. So what equipment is needed now? If you are making CBD isolate, you're typically going to be
You need
using
a fire hose.
yeah, yeah. Well, you need to make sure that you have a place where there is good flammable mechanics around it,
Got it.
because if you're going to be using pentane or butane, you probably have to have a C1D1 room or a C1D2 room, okay? And then you also have to maybe have a
And I wrote
hood or
that down. Did
something
you
like
see that?
that.
I wrote that down. I wanted to ask about C1D, D1, C1D2
Yeah, I see
rooms,
that. Look at
but
that.
I just found it interesting that you start going with what equipment is needed and you have a fire hose. I think that that's awesome.
Yes, better make sure you have that fire hose
Okay, so
or a hood.
stirred reactor
Stirred reactor, filter apparati,
apparatus,
vacuum oven,
vacuum.
solvent recovery system, whether that is some people use falling films for that. Some people use rotovapes for that. Grinder with a cyclone, and then SOPs training and a GC headspace. So this is typically what you want to have available to you. The reason it's nice to have a GC headspace is that so you can test right away,
Yep.
if you've removed all, well, at least enough of the solvent below the limited detection.
So, do you use the grinder with the cyclone when you said you reduce the particle size in
Yeah,
that
that's what
step?
you use. Yeah,
Okay.
and typically what we recommend there is a cone mill
Yep.
with a screen that is maybe 500 microns or
Very
something like that.
fine.
Yeah,
Very, very fine.
yeah.
Yep.
And so it'll start to fall out of that, and it'll make it a really nice uniform particle size. Sometimes if you have a hard time um, getting the yellow out, then you can wash it after it's been
Ah,
with cold solvent.
sure.
Now, here's the deal: if you're going to use a system, and you're going to put the system together, so it's all hooked up together with lids and everything, so that um, really there's no open use of the pentane. What you want to do there, that would allow you to really implement a C1D2 operation, and the equipment that you use should be, C1D2 certified.
Mm.
So if you're going to use, for example, a stirred reactor, one of the things that you should do is you should have an air motor on it so that you're not using like a regular motor.
Sure.
If you have a vacuum pump, you should have the vacuum pump outside of the room with a condenser on the outside of it, so
Yes.
that to prevent any type of gases coming through that vacuum pump and everything. So you want to keep stuff out of the room. Your lights should also, in your electrical circuits, should also be designed for that type of a system. So those are some things that you need to think about when you're implementing CBD isolate. But that is a picture of a reactor. This is a chem glass reactor. So this is a high quality piece of equipment. You can see that there's a electric motor up on the top. You typically would replace that with an air motor. You can buy those off of eBay, in fact, and
Okay.
but this is a high quality one. There are less expensive ones. But yeah, I mean, I think even here, this you can see this right here. That's not a C1D D2 piece of equipment. You would need to have either have this outside the hood, or if it was in a hood, you'd have to figure out what you were going to do with that. But typically, heating and cooling in a stirred reactor. So this is what you use, and this is the stirring reactor, and this is jacketed, so the fluid cooling and heating fluid comes in on the bottom and out on the top.
Okay.
And typically, your chiller is either it's in the room and it's certified, or it's outside the room and it's not certified. You can pipe the heating and cooling fluids in and out of the room. Everything should obviously be grounded, so that's something you need to think about. And typically, your plans for that type of a room will, we do plans for those types of rooms. So if you have a question about what needs to be done in a C1D2 area, you can get a hold of us and ask us what's required there.
Yep.
So, typically you can see here there's a condenser, and there's proper room ventilation is required, proper solvent storage is required. This is where you need to look at your control areas, and you need to define, okay, here's how much of solvent I can have. If you have pentane in here in a room, you can only have a little bit of pentane in the room, and there's maximum limits on how much you can store and how much pentane you can have per control area. So that's something you guys need to think about. And of course, we would do a fire plan for you guys, and help you to find out what those control areas were if you needed them. And we do that as a service, a part of
Sure.
our service, yeah. And then proper heater chiller combination. So sometimes you want to make sure that you have enough kilowatts to put in there,
Sure.
and you want to have enough kilowatts of chilling capacity to remove all the heat.
Yep.
So that's what that is. So that's what we use. And then your solvent recovery. Typically what you want to do is you want to hook up that reactor to a filtration unit, and then the filtration unit would then hook up directly to your solvent recovery,
Gotcha.
so that there's a continuous stream of fluid, and there's nothing open, right?
Okay.
So that's what you would typically do. You can do that with a rotovap, or you can do that with a falling film evaporator and condenser. You would need to figure out which one you wanted in your process.
Okay.
Filtration. This is what we use for filtration. You can see that the tops are open on this. We make a cover for this. We make a bunch of different custom attachments for the top of this drain droid here. But the drain droid's quite nice for the filtration,
Sure.
and it'll basically just suck all the materials through right out of the reactor,
Yep.
and then all the solvent then goes to the solvent removal process, and so that's typically what happens there. The drain droid itself, there's a lid that goes on here, and so it's all enclosed. So
Yep. And at the bottom of that, there's a big round pizza kind of filter that goes on there
right, yep.
for filtering.
So the filter goes in here.
Yep.
And then once the material has been sucked through, and the air starts flowing through it, and it's kind of dried out, then you can take that off, and then you start to dry it.
Yep.
And you dry it in a couple different things. You can do it in a vacuum oven. Typically what we would do is we do an initial dry in a vacuum oven, and then we do a final dry in the rotovap. So a couple different ways to do that. A lot of people have different tricks that they've used, they've implemented to figure out the best way to dry, or the best way to grind, or when to grind. We're not being dogmatic as to which one is better.
Sure.
It's just whatever works for you. So this is an example of a grinder that we use. This is a co-mill grinder, and that's typically with a drying step. We would do your vacuum oven, or we'd do a rotovap, and then one thing has happened to me a couple times is melting, which I just put the controllers up too high, and I walked out of the room, and then I come back and it's all melted. So that's not very good. One thing to remember about your drying is when you heat it up, obviously your solvents are coming off. So your vacuum must have a condenser on it. So you need some sort of a condenser. You should have you can use like the terpene trap for that, which is
Sure.
a big condenser. You need to have something there where you don't want those vapors going into your vacuum and then out, right?
Right.
It's important that everything is grounded, like I said, and then you also need to have a vent that goes out and
Sure.
vented out, so it's not vented into the room.
Yep.
So sometimes also you can grind and dry in successive,
Yep.
patterns. So, but that's typically what it looks like. It's a nice white ground powder, and if you're not successful, it'll look slightly off color, like a little bit of yellow in there
Yep.
or something like
And
that.
if it's slightly melted, it's a little slushy.
Yes, it gets a little slushy. In fact, you can't pour it; it'll solidify right away, and it's just like a hard crystal. So, um, what I would recommend if you are not successful at first getting the crystals nice and white, that you can wash them again. You do a secondary wash, but every time you wash it, you're losing like 15% back to the wash
There you
fluid.
go.
So just make sure that you kind of do it the first time.
You don't want to lose that much.
No,
That costs money. That's money down the drain.
that is. You can try to recrystallize that
Yeah.
with your wash fluid, but then it really gets overwhelming because you're recrystallizing and then you're recrystallizing again. Sometimes you can do that, but and that would be if this stuff was yellow here, you would actually recrystallize that whole batch.
Yeah. And don't forget too that if you're, I mean, we're talking predominantly about CBD, but when you're talking about other cannabinoids and isolating those are different melting points. I mean, they're all
Right.
just slightly different. I mean, they're
Right.
like this close.
Yeah, they're close.
So you just got to be very careful.
So that's the drying step. And then finally, you would test for the residuals and potency.
Mm.
This is something that we typically would do again with a GC headspace. And really, what that is that you would take the sample, you would dissolve it in a standard solvent, and then you would sample the headspace above it. In other words, the little tiny space above the liquid,
Mhm.
the little sampling needle comes in there, sucks up some of that headspace, and then injects it into what they call a gas chromatograph. It's not too sensitive, in fact, but it's adequate enough apparently
For the testing.
for the testing. Yeah.
Good.
And potency can be done with HPLC. So typically, a laboratory, if you were going to put one of these together, you'd have to have the right infrastructure, right? You'd need to make sure that you had the right control areas set
Mhm.
out in the right storage areas. So the third thing would be make sure that you have the right equipment in there, and the right training and the personnel. And you probably, in my view, it would be a very good idea to have a GC headspace in your facility,
Yeah.
so that you could just make sure that, hey, look, it's going to pass the test, and I don't, I can ship this out without having to go to get your final and then go into formulation, because a lot of people they'll actually just formulate and not test it in between, right?
Yeah, that's
And then that solvent gets diluted out, and they're like, "Oh, who cares?" Because it's being diluted out, right? So I don't. I'm a big fan of in-process testing,
yes.
especially with your raw ingredients or with
We
your
may
raw
want to do that
API.
at a future show to go through and just show the HPLC working through that
Oh
in the
yeah,
GC headspace. I
oh
think
yeah,
that would be fun.
yeah. We'll do that.
Well,
That would be fun.
I could be the bull in that China lab.
Oh, that'd be fun. I'd like that. So that was it. That was all I
Wow.
got. Yeah,
That was awesome.
yeah,
I love that. That was really good. In 7 steps, you're
yeah.
making isolate. We did a lot on CBD isolate today, CBD powder, crystals. We showed you
Right.
every step of the way.
Yeah, you see all the CBD isolate crystals they look nice and white. They're nice and granular.
Yeah.
They're small.
And they're used in everything. That's what a lot of the pharma companies are going to with supplementation because
Right.
there's no taste
Right.
there. And so if you're making it, that's where you're going. It is a good market. Things are growing. I appreciate you being here. Well done, Dr. John.
All right. Thank you.
Woo. Thank you. See you next time.
Take care.
Are you stuck in your hemp or cannabis business? Are you not reaching your processing goals? Here at Extract Lab, we offer a free 20-minute CBD jam session. A CBD jam session is a conversation with an industry expert, not a sales call. A conversation where you can talk to us about whatever issues you are having right now and where you are stuck. We will help you uncover any issues you are currently having in your business, create a solution to fit your current scale, develop a future scale-up plan based on your needs, and help you make your processing goals a reality, all while getting your business plan back on track. Schedule your free 20-minute CBD jam session at 1-651-600-0036. Again, that number is 1-651-600-0036.